What's up, everybody? Before we get into today's podcast, please just do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. We are oh so close to 10,000 subscribers, and it would be a big help. Now, let's get into the show. Welcome into the Keep Prowling podcast. I'm your host, DJ Beal, and I got a very familiar face to all of y'all. Once again, my friend Jack Taylor from Bahakel Sports, Bahakel Sports reporter, and we're going to get into this Carolina Panthers stuff in a crazy week one. I mean, you got Aaron Rodgers out for the season. You got whatever the Bengals display of offensive football was this week. I mean, all kinds of things going on in the NFL. I mean, before we get into the Panthers, because I know that's the topic of conversation. But anything crazy you saw last week, you were just like, oh my goodness, what in the world?
I mean, the Giants has to be the biggest question mark. That was crazy. I mean, you win a road playoff game and then you turn around and you pitch a shutout, against the Cowboys. Look, the Cowboys are a good football team. They've got good players, but you expect more from Brian Daboll and that cast of players. And obviously they lost a little bit of talent, but I didn't think to the point where they couldn't even put up a point. Yeah. And I saw the stat. I think it was Michael Schur on the Dan Le Batard show saying that they, in the same game, they had lost, obviously, 40-0, 7-0 with sacks. Mm-hmm. They had a blocked, I think it was the blocked field goal return for a touchdown, and then another turnover for a touchdown. And that has never happened to a team. All of those have never happened to a team in the same season.
Crazy.
And they had all of it happen to them in the same game. That was wild.
Yeah, that is wild. I mean, just, the crazy part about the NFL, you never know what you're going to get. Besides Josh Allen turning the ball over, but whatever. It's just a lot of fun though. Like the NFL, especially week one, you never know what you're gonna get. You got new guys, you got rookie QBs, you got rookies all over the place. I mean, how can you write the script of the Monday night ender with the guy undrafted free agent coming out here and winning the game for you?
I think the script writes itself. Xavier Gibson was the star of that last few episodes of Hard Knocks, and of course he gets the ability to get that punt return for the overtime win, and especially with Aaron Rodgers walking on the field and leaving 2 seconds later, in New York in a game that was really big for a day that's really big for New York. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was like, all right, maybe the NFL is a little scripted, maybe just a little bit. That's too coincidental.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely, man. I just week one was crazy, and I'm sure week two will have no absence of craziness as well. But how things been going in your world as we jump into it? Because I know high school sports is we right in the thick of everything right now. I mean, there's a couple of new shows going on with Game On, the Blitz. I mean, you've been a busy man.
Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks. You said high school football getting started, then college football, NASCAR. Like last weekend, we had the Duke Mayo Classic, and then we were out in Duke for that upset against Clemson. We were there for that too, with Darlington right in the middle of race, because it's also playoffs for NASCAR. Exactly. So the postseason's going on for NASCAR. Yep. You still have to take care of that. But yeah, it's been a lot going forward, and for media in Charlotte especially, it was the focus was taken away from really the NFL and the start of the season due to all these contract issues with Brian Burns. That's been the biggest thing, going to these practices, going to the locker rooms. It was a different aura in the locker rooms this last week because there's kind of that tension of what's going on. Yeah. Why has this not happened yet?
Exactly. And they figured it out, and Brian Burns played pretty darn well.
Yeah, I mean, figured it out. I don't know. I don't know because they've at least come to an understanding. I think that shows a test of Brian Burns' character. There's two ways to handle that situation, and you can do what Chris Jones did, and now he got his 1-year extension, and he's gotten the money that he thinks that at least he deserves. He obviously didn't get the deal he wanted. You could be like Nick Bosa. He didn't have to hold out. They gave him a giant amount of money. Yeah. For, Brian Burns, though, he had said it and made it very clear going through training camp. Once he was healthy enough to play, he said, I'm not going to sit out. This is bigger than me. It's obviously, he said, it's not bigger than me, right, but the defense that we put together, I'm a part of it and a crucial part of it, so I'm going to make sure I'm there. And, yeah, that first half, his presence was incredibly felt. Obviously, they schemed to him more in the second half to where he was kind of taken out of the equation, but that's more of an issue of having nobody on the other side to back him up. I mean, that the biggest thing that I had the question of the game, we can get into it, of course, but, Justin Houston was non-existent in that game. Yeah. We didn't see, hide or tail of him. Mm-hmm. And when you have, Marquise Haynes on IR, DJ Johnson, Yetur Gross-Matos, none of them doing anything, Amare Barno nowhere to be found. Yeah. They all played, I think, between all of them, they played each maybe, I think, 2 or 3 snaps. Yeah. and that's just you can't do that.
Do you think it was because they didn't use Justin Houston enough, or he just was not? Because the biggest thing about Justin Houston last year for the Ravens was he was available, he was there, he was near the quarterback, but he couldn't finish the play.
Well, I mean, I would disagree honestly because he led the Ravens in sacks.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous at his age, and he played. Now he did only play about half the season.
Right.
I think it was about 7 games he played. So I see what you're saying in that regard. But I don't know. I mean, when they signed him and they signed Deion Jones, right in the same week, and then they cut Deion Jones. Now he's back on the practice squad.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I see what you're doing with Deion Jones. He's supposed to be that guy that can play that hybrid. Deion Jones has been the technique to be able to stand up, go down and rush, and then you cut him. So it's like, all right, well then we don't have him anymore.
Exactly.
Especially right before we found out about Marquise Haynes. So then they pick up Justin Houston. Or I'm sorry, they found out about Haynes. Then they picked up Deion Jones, and then they picked up Justin Houston as well. So I don't know. It seemed like it didn't seem like they were ready for the first week. And I don't know if all this contract stuff played a part in it or not. Yeah. It just seemed like they weren't ready.
Well, and I think if the New York Giants, maybe they didn't teach us very much in week 1, but previous iterations of the New York Giants taught us anything, pass rush depth is huge.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, they had the NASCAR package. They had all these packages when they were winning Super Bowls and everything. Because, like, keeping those guys fresh and ready and, ready to go at you don't know who's coming.
Yeah.
That's big, and I think the Panthers may have to take a page out of that. I think, we talked about it, I think, last time you came on the show, Unique Ngakoue, right? Like, a guy that I think both of us were like, that's a good guy to pick up. He's still young. He's still got a lot left in him. But for whatever reason, it wasn't in the cards, right?
Yeah.
So, it's just one of those things where it's like, they're going to they may have to either make a move or, they're going to have to figure out something, I think. Because I think Brian Burns, he was a menace. I think when he was in, like, before they started, especially first half, he was a menace. He was everywhere. But then it's like, who's going to pick up the slack? And I think that's the big question mark right now.
It is. I mean, the Panthers are a very top-heavy team. And we knew this, all the pieces they added in the offseason made you feel a little bit better. And then once that cut day happened, and whether it was just because it was such a brutal transition to go from, 90 to 53 in one day, it seemed like they just cleaned house of a lot of depth that obviously they had to get rid of. But you just sit there and wonder, okay, now, what are they doing in that regard? And so with Brian Burns, I mean, look, he deserves top 5 money. He does. I mean, you can say what you want about what the output shows on the box score, but to me, if you're focusing solely on the box score, you're not paying attention. You don't see. It's like the same thing with J.C. Horn. We can get into that too. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily about their presence on the field, but it's their presence when they're not on the field. When Brian Burns is quiet, you saw Tyler Algier run all over you. You know, when he's getting double teamed, there's nobody else to pick up the slack. Same with J.C. Horn. The minute he goes out in that game, if J.C. stays healthy in that game, I'm not saying it's a win, but it's definitely not 24-10.
Yeah, and I think the 24, because you're going to look at the box score, right? You're going to look at the ending score and be like 24-10. Oh, man, the Panthers were out of this game, but that's not necessarily true. It was closer than the score indicated.
Oh, absolutely. And you can say shoulda, woulda, coulda, if, ands, or buts, but you have that confusing penalty, offsetting penalties on that punt return with Isthmus, and getting the horse collar and putting us in the 2-yard line. And that was weird in how it went out. But that second down, because he overthrew Adam Thielen on the first one. Yeah. That second down, though, he had Jonathan Mingo on a house call, 5 yards ahead of his guy. He put it just a bit too far, but if he connects that pass, Mingo's got the speed to take that distance. You get a 99-yard touchdown. It's a tie ball game.
Right.
It was at that point, I want to say 17-10 at that point in time, if my memory serves me right. And you get that touchdown, boom, now you're back in business. But it doesn't happen. You can't get a first down. You're putting out of your own end zone. They're able to, Kyle Pitts, burn C.J. Henderson, and then Tyler Algier finishes off the drive. Now it's 24-10 with maybe 6 minutes left. Yep. There's nothing else you can do at that point. So, I mean, it's the box score. Those are fantasy football touchdowns. Those Tyler Algier touchdowns were more fantasy touchdowns than anything. I think that, it's interesting to how that goes. But to me, that leads a bigger question with, Scott Fitterer. I think the narrative around Scott Fitterer has flipped a lot in this last 2-3 weeks. The fans have really turned on him. Not all of them per se, but a good majority of them, as Panthers fans can be. And so it's interesting to see what he's going to do free agency-wise going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, not only free agency but trades too. You got to look in both avenues because one trade, one good pickup could be the difference between your season being a losing season and a winning season.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last time. The kind of staple of these championship teams over the last few years, outside of the Chiefs, I would say, has been picking up those bigger, names, those veteran presences throughout the season. You think back, the Rams with OBJ and Von Miller, or you think to, the Bucks getting, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette, guys like that, halfway through the season. And that's been able to propel them forward into the Super Bowl. So, I don't think this team is obviously Super Bowl ready, but if they want to make a splash, signing a guy like T. Higgins in free agency or making a trade for, another veteran pass rusher or a veteran corner. Because if JC's injury, we haven't heard anything about it yet still. We're waiting on it.
Yeah.
But if that, if worse comes to worse and it falls what it's been the last few years, you got to get somebody in the backfield.
Yeah. And I've always said that the pass rush helps out those corners too. It helps out the secondary. If I can get pressure on you to force you into some of those errant throws, that's when the secondary looks at its best.
Oh, absolutely.
Because even with the best cover guys, you can't cover forever.
No, I mean you see that all the time. The Legion of Boom was so great because they still had a good front seven. Even you look back at the Panthers Super Bowl run, that front seven was the best in the NFL for the last, for the 5 years around it. And, you look at who's the cornerbacks there. It was Charles Tillman and Cortland Finnegan, guys that were up, close to retirement. You had Josh Norman and James Bradbury, and say what you will about Bradbury at that time. He wasn't developed. So I absolutely agree. And so you're going to see that going forward. And it's what kind of concerns me about this defense. And I think Avero, is still trying to get his feet under him with this defense. Because to me, they didn't get after the quarterback nearly enough, especially once they started to scheme to Burns. Yeah. I think that the Panthers didn't adjust as much in the second half compared to how the Falcons did.
Right.
So I think that, had a big impact.
Yeah, and I think, too, the biggest thing about this game is because the first half, it was very, very close. It was back and forth. It was, these two defenses were kind of teeing off, kind of tit for tat to a certain degree. And it's crazy because in the second half with the adjustments that Atlanta made, it felt like they got more into what they wanted to do. It felt like the Panthers were dictating, hey, this is what you're going to do in the first half. But in the second half, that's when Atlanta was like, all right, we're going to let Bijan be Bijan. We're going to let Tyler Algier be Tyler Algier, right? And then we can still beat you over the top because there's talent out here, And I think Desmond Ridder looked better than anybody could ever imagine, considering what we've seen from him before.
Yeah, I think that he definitely showed that he has the ability to run this offense. He's got the weapons around him that you would want. You've got a young guy in Kyle Pitts and a young stud already in Bijan Robinson. That first touchdown that he had was ridiculous. And, it doesn't hurt to have guys, like Kyle Pitts out there and others wide receivers. And it doesn't help, it didn't hurt him that the Panthers weren't getting to him. They weren't creating that pressure. And, he had, I think also, because you weren't creating that pressure, that's where the mistakes didn't show up. Games are won with turnovers. The turnover batter will decide the game. And I don't think Bryce Young should take the full blame for what happened. Jesse Bates is a veteran cornerback who knows how to do this. He's been doing it for a while. And they were able to scheme up in a way that they were able to get to him. The line played a lot better than we thought. Chandler Zavala played a lot better than anyone expected him to in his first start. No one was thinking he was going to be starting. No one was. We were hoping that Corbett was going to be healthy come into this week. So I think that, the turnover battle was definitely bigger. I don't think Bryce Young played. I don't think Bryce Young there was anything to be worried about with Bryce Young. It was a first game, big jitters, loud stadium.
Yeah.
So those, they got all their points off of the turnovers, yes.
Yeah.
Or not all, but 17 points off of those turnovers, the points that mattered.
Yeah.
But I think that that's not something that is going to be common from him.
Yeah, and Bryce Young's a guy who typically takes care of the ball. And I think it felt like, number one, I think it felt like two things. It felt like Jesse Bates kind of had his number a little bit. It felt like Jesse Bates was reading him more than he could catch up to the speed of what Jesse Bates was.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, I think there were a couple of throws that ended up being interceptions that Bryce Young made that may have been college open, but not necessarily NFL open. But you don't know that till you're in that in-game speed.
Yeah, and I think that's the more of the transition he's going to have to hit. That's why you saw him overthrow some of these receivers. We don't have the speed of Bama receivers.
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest issue, honestly, as far as the offense goes, is the receivers right now. And, you don't know how big of a difference G.J. Chark's presence would have played. But, Ish Smith was supposed to be your fast guy. I didn't really see anything from him. You cut your other faster receivers. They're not getting separation. The reason Jesse Bates can play up in that second line and sit there and ball hawk is because he knows there's nothing going downfield. I mean, they pushed the ball downfield maybe twice, 3 times. You look at the route tree and the flow chart for Bryce Young's passing attempts, and none of them went farther than 10 yards. Yeah. At least the ones that were completed. So if you can't push the ball downfield because you don't have fast receivers that can do so, then those safeties, those all-pro safeties, are going to bite down incredibly hard and just sit there. And that's why both of those plays, Bryce Young threw that ball not expecting there to be a safety that far down. Yeah. Because you wouldn't expect the safety to be where the linebackers are in those kind of plays. And Jesse Bates is going to creep up and ball hawk every time. So I think it's honestly more of an issue of, that's where like a guy like T. Higgins, who's clearly not going to get utilized at all in Cincinnati, would be a huge get for this offense. But it also leads to the question of, you're not paying Brian Burns right now. It came out, the Bears, we all knew that the Bears either wanted Brian Burns, DJ Moore, or Derek Brown. Derek Brown obviously is untouchable. He had his impact. If you already overplayed your hand here by showing how much you passed up from the Rams, those 2 first-rounders for Brian Burns, you're not paying him now. And you traded away your fastest receiver and, your best wide receiver. Now, he might not have been doing well in Chicago right now, but it's a big question mark for Fitterer where it's like, what is the thought process here then? Why did you trade away if you knew you were trying to get this rookie quarterback who needs that good talent? Because the wide receivers you could have gotten every one of these wide receivers more than likely and kept DJ Moore. Yeah. I mean, you would have obviously had to sign a big name or at least a comparable name in the pass rush, a B-list guy. So that might have cost you a pretty penny. But would it have been more worth it to have a guy like DJ Moore? Yeah. That's where the question mark lies.
It's tough because it's an offensive league, and the hardest thing right now, I think, there's a couple of things. It's, the quarterback that moves around is difficult, but also, like, the fact that they have this plethora of weapons. Like, that's why Cincinnati has been so dangerous the last couple of years, is because where do I put my top guy? Yeah. I mean, we saw what Miami did. We saw what the Chargers did, right? When you have all of this talent that you can go to on the outside, then you put a good tight end in there as well, which that's why Hayden Hurst was able to eat a little bit because, he's kind of is your security blanket. I think, I agree. I think they're going to have to find some sort of a speed guy. You need at least one guy. You need at least one guy that can take the top off the defense and then let Thielen work, intermediate. Let maybe a guy like Mingo work intermediate, DJ Chark and these guys work those intermediate areas. But also, I think DJ Chark was probably a bigger missing piece than I thought he was going to be, because it seems like, just from what we've seen, it seems like him and Bryce have some sort of a connection together. Like they I don't know if they did a couple of off-season workouts that we didn't see, but like they seem like the two guys. He seems like almost like his go-to guy outside of Hayden Hurst. So it'll be interesting to see what exactly they do, because they're going to have to find something, but I think getting this core together, I think the fact that it was week 1, Bryce Young hasn't seen true NFL action yet. I think the Panthers played pretty well for what was right in front of them. I just think Atlanta outplayed everybody's expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Atlanta is nothing to sniff at. I think they are, I wouldn't say a good football team, quote unquote. I think that they play well, and the Panthers have always played, down to the Falcons. There's never been a season where, even the year they went 15-1, that one loss was to Atlanta in Atlanta. So that's, the crowd, I think, played a much bigger presence. It looked a lot like he was not able to hear the calls coming in. And I think the problem, though, becomes is that, for the offensive play calls, I think it followed along what everyone was worried about in the preseason. They did still seem very lackluster. I mean, you go for that fourth down in the very first drive, which I love the aggressiveness, but then you try to run up the middle with Chuba Hubbard. That's not going to work. We don't have there's not a short yardage running back on that team, and that was a big concern. So I think you have to definitely open up your playbook, because the thing is, it's okay to be kind of lackluster in the first game if you're not playing a divisional rival. Because now we're sitting at a situation, the Panthers are sitting at a situation where you could be 0-2 in the division come next Tuesday. And and I know that, while the fans are hoping for a playoff push right off the bat, It might not be what the front office and the staff their goal is. Obviously, their goal is to win. It might not be their expectation, but it's going to be a lot harder to do to get a wild card spot or a divisional spot if you're 0-2 before September is even already over.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because, the organization knows what they have, it feels like. But I think a lot of fans are like, they want this team to be really good now because you were one game away from hosting a playoff game last year. So you're sitting here like, all you got to do is take that one step forward. But sometimes that one step forward is more difficult than it ever seemed.
Yeah, I think this fan base has also just been so traumatized by the last 4 or 5 years to the point where they're openly rooting for Nebraska's loss every single week. I mean, you see it on Twitter. They're getting, enjoyment out of it. I'm not going to say that I don't, but I think that's the problem. And of course, when it comes to like these contract situations, it's very reminiscent of Julius Peppers the first time around. And that's where a lot of fans, question the maturity of this organization's essence. Obviously, it's much different staffs, but it's the same kind of situation. You had Julius Peppers. And that was even worse because he was all pro talent at that point in time, Pro Bowl talent, your top draft pick, your highest to that point, playing out of his mind, and you don't give him the money he wants. Yep. And then he goes to Chicago for however many years and continues to dominate and make you feel bad about it. Mm-hmm. So it's that same eerie situation where it's like, why are you not paying your top guy? Yeah. Now that you said you were waiting for Nick Bosa to get a contract. Well, he got a contract, $32 million, that you are now going to have to at least come close to. I think they said earlier the sitting ground was like 26, 28. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to be lucky if it's not 30. And now Chris Jones has a contract too. That was the only other holdout. Mm-hmm. Now that helps you a little bit with the 1-year option. Yeah. But if you've already set yourself up in this issue to begin with, it was why they didn't pay Hassan Reddick. It was why they've had to restructure contracts. So you've been pushing this off for so long. Mm-hmm. He can walk next year, absolutely. And if you don't give him a contract by this coming week, I mean, you've got the extra day. You've got the extra time. Take your time because it's going to say a lot about Fitterer and this front staff if this is how you're going to start your new regime.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is too, I've been living on this kind of quote that you have to pay your players. There are special guys who you have to pull out the pocketbook for and give them what they're asking for. Because the thing is, in the NFL, you hope, you expect, you hope that you draft well enough to find a top 5 player. But then when it's time to pay them, sometimes we get a little bit like, well, we might can draft somebody else. But, Brian Burns is a special player. There's a reason why Myles Garrett is still sitting in Cleveland, right? There's a reason why Bosa's still sitting in San Francisco, right? And the other Bosa's still sitting in LA, right? Because they understand these guys are special. These guys are game breakers. These guys will end games for you, right? These guys will let once again, this offense is young, especially at, no pun intended, especially at the quarterback position. So with that being said, you're going to have to the defense is going to have to play well enough to let the offense catch up. And that's okay because that's exactly what you expect this defense to do. This defense has to step up until the offense finds their rhythm, figures out, okay, this is what we do. These are our tendencies. This is my go-to guy. Like, that takes time, and like this defense and the fact that Brian Burns hasn't been paid, I think there should be a little bit of worry. Because not only do offenses have tendencies, the defenses have tendencies, front offices have tendencies, right? Like, and when you haven't paid that guy, it's felt like in such a long time, why should I believe that you will now?
I mean, I completely agree, and they're going to put themselves in a hole going forward because Jeremy Chinn's contract's up at the end of this year. Yetur Gross-Matos' contract up at the end of this year. Now, I'm not saying that you pay Yetur Gross-Matos because I don't believe that he should get that kind of extension, at least not from what he's shown so far. I would love for him to prove himself to be able to get that money. But Jeremy Chinn, I mean, that's, again, one of your building block pieces, the guys they said they would not trade. And so, I think he was also fairly non-existent on Sunday. The way they said they were going to use him differently, that kind of X role, that spur role, was not really there from what I could see. And so, but you're going to dig yourself in that hole where you're going to have to pay multiple contracts coming up at the end of this year, and it's going to be the point where you're going to have to make a decision. And I don't think you want to put yourself in that spot if you can avoid it. Yeah. So I think that's where it's like, you get that deal done now. Franchise tagging is only just delaying the inevitable. Yep. That's all it's doing, and it's only creating more of an insecurity between and a rift between that player in the front office to go, okay, you just want to push it off till you don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work out often.
And, you know, this is the NFL. This is not Best Buy or any of these retail stores where the item depreciates, right, to the point where you're going to pay less later, right? That PS5 is less now than it was when it first came out. But this is the NFL. I want my big contract because sometimes I only get one.
Yeah. And they're putting their body, and that's the thing, you know, they're putting their bodies out on the line, and you've seen it a lot more in different areas, you know, especially with running backs not getting paid, quarterbacks, you know, now getting paid, but that's where you have the back and forth. Quarterbacks getting paid, Joe Burrow gets his money. What does he do What does he do week one? He does nothing, you know, and that's the argument they use. Well, you didn't do anything anyway, so why should we pay? You know, look how much money they gave him. He didn't do anything, so why should we give you that money in the hopes that you don't, you know, hopes that you do something, and if you don't, now we look stupid. But I think that's been always one of the bigger issues for the Panthers is they have relied on that bargain bin. They have scraped the bottom of the barrel to just get Band-Aid fixes for a lot of different positions and a lot of different players, and it's done its damage to Panthers fandom over the time. So it's like, all right, you've got your guys now. Pay the guys that deserve to be paid. Don't go out and just find these, you know, bargain bin guys wherever. You know, Justin Houston's not one of those, but but it's indicative to what they used to do, you know, and how they used to go about handling. Even in the Super Bowl era, now it worked out well, but that's when you were signing guys at the end of their ropes like Jared Allen and, like I said, Cortland Finnegan and you know, Roman Harper.
Yeah.
So it's where it's like, all right, you don't have to wait for that kind of stuff or get guys past their prime. You have guys in their prime. Yeah. So go ahead and sign them.
Exactly. And go ahead and sign them and get ready for the run you want to make in maybe a year or two or whatever it may be. Because young quarterbacks can win. They can win now, but, you know, they got to have the right pieces around them, and, you know, coaching goes into that as well. But let's jump into this Panthers-New Orleans Saints matchup. The Monday Night Football home opener, Bryce Young under the lights. I mean, if there was any pressure on the young man and the rest of these guys, you know, it's got to be there, right?
Oh, I mean...
And you don't want to start 0-2 in the division.
No.
On top of that, I mean, let's just add even more scoops of that ice cream.
Yeah, no, they don't want to start in that way at all, and it's going to get even worse going forward. I mean, they you know, the script writers of the NFL did not like the Panthers because you could not write a tougher first month in the NFL for Bryce Young and the staff. You have the 2 divisional games and then 2 NFC games against powerhouse programs like Seattle and Detroit. And that's a ridiculous first month of football. So, yeah, I mean, this is there could not be a bigger start. I mean, you know, Cam Newton, when he was his first game, it was, you know, it was Arizona, it was Green Bay, and there was, you know, a couple other ones that he had big games. But, I mean, this has been huge for Bryce Young. You go on the road to Atlanta, and now you got to host the Saints Monday night. The extra day should be helpful, and it's going to be a lot more, like I said, the biggest issue is going to be their health. If JC can't play, that's a whole different story because I didn't see a whole lot from the Saints that, you know, impressed me. I really didn't. I mean, the Titans, you know, are always an odd football team to try to figure out, but they're not by any means a top-tier football team. But I didn't see anything from the Saints other than their kicker that impressed me. You know, they were going back and forth the whole time, and it finally got some touchdowns there at the end. But it's still the Saints, you know, and I think Derek Carr is Derek Carr. They have a much better front four and front seven than the Falcons do. Their cornerbacks are here or there. I mean, obviously Ryan Tannehill was picked off multiple times. And they will find a way to terrorize you just like the Falcons did. Their offensive weapons, you know, Jawan Johnson at tight end. You've got Chris Olave. Obviously, that's going to be the biggest thing. If we don't have all the cornerbacks are not healthy on that team, you don't have the firepower to match up with Michael Thomas and Chris Olave. Yeah. And that's going to be the bigger issue. You could get into, you know, and I don't think if DJ Chark is not healthy that you can afford to get into a shootout. It's just not going to go your way. I hope that, you know, I think a big issue last week was that home presence. I think it didn't necessarily get to Bryce, it seemed like. He did seem, you know, fairly calm and collected, especially in those first few drives. I think it much more got into the heads of the rest of the guys. You saw, you know, a couple crucial false starts, crucial delay of games, you know, 12 men on the field at one point. Hopefully that's reversed, you know, and the fans show out at Bank of America. I'm worried about it, not because I'm worried about Panthers fandom, but because of everything that's happened at this beginning of the season with Brian Burns and just the way that the preseason went. There is a bit of that kind of, you know, pessimism around Panthers fandom, and obviously they have every right to with how the last few years have gone, but also the Saints travel well, and New Orleans fans travel really well, so I'm hoping that it could be really 50-50 at that stadium on Monday night.
Yeah, I think I think that should help, though, the fact that the Panthers are playing at home, because I think there should be this level of excitement, this level of buzz to see this team for the first time this 2023 season with these new crop of guys. You got the number 1 overall pick and all that. Like, you're excited. The same excitement we saw when Bryce Young was drafted, we should see on game day, right? Let's hope, But I think at the same time, there's gonna be the Saints. I think are a tough team for the Panthers, which is always
absolutely
kind of have been. But I think that home field advantage is going to have to play a role. I think that's going to have, that kind of 12th man, if you will, is going to have to be everything that the Panthers need to kind of push them over the edge. Now, can the Panthers get started quick, fast, and in a hurry? That's going to be the real question. Because once again, then it leans onto the defense to, get pressure and stop all the talent that the Saints have offensively. But can they do that? That's a whole other question.
Look, I mean, I haven't been in Bank of America Stadium for a Panthers game in a couple years now, but I've seen, obviously how it's looked on TV from friends in the city, what the vibes have been like. Now, I have been to multiple FC games, and even with the bowl half filled, it's been more electric than some Panthers games in years past. The Mayo Classic with the South Carolina and Chapel Hill was one of the more electric I've seen that stadium in a long time.
Yeah.
And I would be less worried about it had, the preseason not went the way it went, had this Brian Burns contract, because it felt like all that excitement from the majority of Panthers fans, outside of Twitter especially, it seemed like all that excitement has gone away, or has been incredibly reduced. Now, they did a great job in the offseason of hyping this team up, hyping up this season, as they should, but it feels like just all of that has started to whittle away, and that leads me to be a little scared about obviously those tickets are bought well in advance, but you can sell tickets, you can not show up, and I don't think people won't show up, but I do get a little concerned about how it's going to show up. I think obviously because it is Bryce Young's first game, that'll be huge. It's not going to be like, Cam coming back to the stadium or anything like that, but it is going to be a big deal. Yeah. And so I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that they do show out in a big fashion, because that will play a huge role in how it gets going. And then, with the Panthers, you can always kind of tell within those first few drives how the game's going to go more than likely. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be really indicative if those first few drives do go well, that's going to really carry the momentum. But if they go and if there's a 3-and-out and a touchdown, that stadium will be quiet.
Well, and I think, Panthers fans in general, and I think everybody should relax a little bit. It's week 1.
Oh, absolutely.
It's week 1. You got a new coaching staff. Everybody's learning something new. The defense just shifted to 3-4. That's new for them too. So it's hard to pick up where you left off when where you left off was a whole other scheme than before. So I think right now, the pessimism, the frustration, I get it, right? I get that instant gratification mindset, but at the same time, it's like, relax a little bit. It's only week 1. Because the thing is, in week 2 coming up, the thing about it is if you get this win, right, you get this win at home, you're 1-1 in the division, you're 1-1, overall, I think you're feeling pretty good, right? I said it last week. I think don't be afraid of the Panthers starting 1-3, even though it's you don't want it to happen, but 500 1-3 is better than what the alternative. So I think. Yeah, I think the fans are going to have to get into this game. I think they're going to have to be ready to excite. They're going to have to out-cheer the New Orleans fans in the stands. But I think on the field, I would love to see if the Panthers are going to lose this game, at least be disciplined in losing it, right? Be clean, That's going to be the biggest thing. Because like you said, 17 points off turnovers, right? If you limit those turnovers, maybe one turnover because, mistakes happen, or good plays happen, then let's see where you are. Because, it was only a 14-point swing at the end of the day. So I think I could see the Panthers winning this game, but I think they're going to have to play clean football. They're going to have to show that, yes, we're a young team. We're new. We're learning new things. There can be some mistakes along the way, but we're right there as long as we play clean football.
I agree. I think they at least have to play comparative football. I think if you look back, like I said, it's different to compare those eras, and I think it's just more of a matter of the trauma that the Panthers fans have gone through in the last, 5-6 years. Because when Cam Newton first got here, they were 1-3 to start off that. They didn't even win the first 2 games. They were playing, incredible games against Arizona and Green Bay in those first 2 games. Cam didn't win his first 2 games, but the thing was, he throws 4 touchdowns. He has 4 total touchdowns in each game. Yeah. He has 400 yards in each game. Yeah. And there was no expectation of Bryce Young to come out and do that exact thing because he's just not the insane level of athlete that Cam Newton was. Mm-hmm. He's playing with different weapons. But the problem has always been is, Rivera took 3-4 years to get going. And even then in that last, it was the first season, he was 1-3 to start out. People were ready for his head. Yeah. Then they win the next 12 straight, and they have, that bye week. Yeah. But there was always that, all right, even if the defense plays poorly or if they turn over the ball, there's a comparative level of offense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what has been just so detrimental to Panthers fans over the last few years. The defense has always been much better than the offense up until the Super Bowl year where the offense was just lights out. Then even the next few years, those games were those games were shootouts. Up until Cam got his injury in Pittsburgh, the games were won in shootouts or they were lost, in last-second stuff. And that was heartbreaking, but it was at least exciting, and there was always a chance. With the Matt Rule era, it was giving up those leads, not being able to put up points, not being able to win games if the defense scored more, if the other team scored more than 17 points. Yeah. And I think that's where just people got really worried about it, with seeing this last game, the offensive inability to be able to complete drives and get get points on the board, and then then having the defense falter in the back half. And I think that's where I think the Panthers can absolutely win this game. I think this whole season, now I thought about it before the preseason, I thought a lot of these games are 50-50 just because, like you said, the NFL's crazy, and it's gotten so much crazier in recent years that it's almost impossible to predict some of these games. Mm-hmm. No, don't sit there and tell me that you would have that anyone was thinking that the Cowboys would go 40-0 over New York, or that Aaron Rodgers would go down week 1, the first play, but they would beat the Bills in overtime. Exactly. No one predicted that at all. So a lot of these games are right up in the air. Seattle, Detroit, maybe not as much, but the Saints. We always have that early season victory against the Saints. We've had the last 4. Every rule that was Rule's bread and butter was beating the Saints. Within the first 3 weeks of the season. Now would he win another game after that? No, but I think there's always a chance, and it's going to come down to, I think you're right, the turnover battle. Controlling the momentum in that stadium and really showing what you can do as an offense. I think there needs to be a lot more. They kept Bryce Young very contained, which I understood. That touchdown drive was very cut and paste. Do this, go there, first progression, get it out quick, which I liked, and the passes looked really good. He looked very poised. I just need to see a bit more of that. I need to see a bit more of that urgency, that desperation. Mm-hmm. I think that there was a little bit of a lack. Hurry-up
offense might help with that. Putting all of the pressure onto the opposing defense. Because sometimes that does help when you can kind of, not necessarily freeform, but just you can call your own number a little bit. And it might just be also, the answer might be Bryce is not ready for that yet.
I was going to say, in Bama, he was doing that. And Bama, he was calling up plays. He was leading that hurry-up offense. He knew the playbook inside and out. He knew his players inside and out, and he could do that. Here, he's not going to have that familiarity. If he has it this season, it will be very late. Mm-hmm. And not only him, but, you have all these coaches. We don't know how it's going through with Reich and then Thomas Brown to be able to call these plays. And then he's got to be able to go to, I don't think it's as much of, the play calling had me a bit concerned, but it's also the fact of we have an entirely new starting cast for our offense. Right. New wide receivers in every position, new tight end, new running back, new quarterback. That does not happen very often where you have a complete overhaul. Yeah. And so there's got to be that level of chemistry built, and it is unfortunate when you have some of those injuries where Miles Sanders doesn't play any of the preseason. DJ Chark barely plays, and now he's not playing now.
Exactly.
So I think that's going to take more time, but to compensate, you have to then be a bit more aggressive in your play calls. Yeah. You have to do things that you are maybe not comfortable with because you don't have the ability to kind of get into that routine. And so I think that's where it kind of comes about. And if they can get the Saints on their toes, I think it'll do well. But that's the biggest thing, is if they can do that.
Yeah, and real quick before we get into the picks for the rest of the league, who are you going with the Panthers here, or are you thinking it's going to be tough sledding?
It's definitely going to be tough sledding. It's going to be a toss-up either way, I'd say. I think that, because like I said, outside of, it really depends on the health, I'd say. If we don't if J.C. Horton's not in the game, if DJ Chark's not playing, I feel a lot less confident about this team. Yeah. I would put it still a 50-50 shot And I think it's going to be whoever wins that turnover battle, really. Whoever's able to keep it, because Derek Carr's not going to give the ball away. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. The defense is going to need to be more aggressive to get them on their toes. Derek Carr, if you let him sit back there, he's going to overthrow some passes. He's going to underthrow some passes. But if he gets confident, if he gets going, he's going to tear you apart, especially if he knows that he can. So I out of sheer optimism and the hype around it, I will pick the Panthers to win. Yeah. I'd say like 21 to 17 is what I would put it at. Okay. But it could easily be the other way around if the Saints winning 21 to 17.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go Panthers too. I think from what I saw last week, I'm not gonna read too much into the final score. I'm gonna read more into the in between the lines of what I saw, and I think this defense they're finding themselves. But I think there's gonna have to be some sort of adjustments to be made, but I think this is a good kind of adjustment game. I think the offense will get going a little bit more. Maybe there will be a couple of easier plays in there, kind of drive starter type plays, a couple screens, stuff like that, just to kind of get Bryce Young going early. And I think it'll be a big night.
I think they need to push the ball downfield. They need to get the defense, the contracts figured out. You got to get Brian Burns figured out, and then figure out the health of your other guys. And, they need to push the ball downfield and just create that kind of consistency. I think you talked about the box score not reading into the. I think you need to read into that 10 points is a lot more telling than the 24 is. Yeah. I mean, not being able to put up more than the one touchdown is a problem, and it's been a problem. So I think if they're going to need to put up some offense.
Yeah. And I think, too, they'll lean a little more on Miles Sanders because, he hasn't played in a while now. So – that's another thing, too. You can't just hop out there 100% and get back to where you want to be. So I think he'll be a little better in this game, too, kind of as because I think they want to lean on him to kind of help out Bryce Young a little bit and, give it a little 1-2 punch to a certain degree. So we'll see. But who do you guys think at home? What do you got? Who do you guys think is winning? Panthers? Saints? Who knows? I mean, home opener. Monday night.
Just show out. Just show up and show out.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. Throw everything at the wall, Throw everything at the wall. I think that's how it's got to be. But let's get into the picks. Follow along at home, as always. Let's jump into Thursday night game. It's Minnesota at Philadelphia. Who gets the win?
This is interesting. I was not that was the one shocker game for me. I did not think the Vikings were to come out like that and lose. It doesn't help they lost to the Bucs either. That does not help in the slightest. I think that the Vikings could be coming for revenge in this one, and New England showed that the Eagles are vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I could see the Vikings pulling out a win in this one.
Okay, I think for me, playing at Philly, that's tough on a short week. I'm gonna go Minnesota too, though, because I think Minnesota is talented enough. I think it's going to all come down to coaching for them. Can they finish these games? That's been their biggest issue for a long, long time. That's been a big issue for Kirk Cousins-led teams. Can you finish games? But I think they get a big win in the NFC and kind of shake up the NFC a little bit.
I can see it.
Okay. Green Bay at Atlanta.
Look, with the way Green Bay played against Chicago, I thought Chicago was a better team than that, and I didn't think the Packers was that good of a team. I could see. This one, again, I think will be close to being in Atlanta again, but I think Green Bay pulls out the win in this one. Okay. I think they just look dominant against the Bears, and I think that the Bears do present some of the same problems that Atlanta has. Like I said, I think Atlanta might have a false sense of confidence in this one. Mm-hmm. I can see the Packers pulling this one out.
Okay. I think for me, I'm going to go Green Bay. I think Green Bay, from what I saw, and I know it's 1 week of football, can't read too much into it, but I think Jordan Love looked good. He looked clean. I mean, he even kind of gave a little Aaron Rodgers out there. Like, just the way he threw the ball, like, his confidence, just how calm he was. Like, he didn't seem rattled at all.
It was impressive.
I was very impressed by what they did, especially considering I thought Chicago was going to be far better than what they looked like, and that raises concerns for me because it's Chicago. And, speaking of hurt, they've been through it too. So I think Green Bay wins this game. I think they're so well coached. I think Matt LaFleur is a really good coach, and I think offensively, I think that's why we're still seeing some pretty good fireworks from that team.
I would agree.
I think Green Bay wins that one too. Las Vegas against Buffalo.
I think Buffalo's coming for blood in this one. Las Vegas, they had played a impressive game. I want to say. thereabout. I mean, obviously the Broncos looked, not great, but I believe Buffalo will be coming back for revenge after that, after that loss last week. They need to show that they're the team that they say they are. Josh Allen is going to try to pick apart this defense. I don't see Jimmy Garoppolo coming in and putting together the same kind of game that they did. They do look very vulnerable though, so this one could easily be a toss-up. But I'll stick with Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm going Vegas. I think it would be weird to see Buffalo start 0-2.
It would,
but I mean, there's something about Josh Allen and turning over the ball that he can't be. I don't know what it is. I don't know, because I know he's a gunslinger. I get that. He's gonna try to make a play, and I think this defense, because of how aggressive they are, I think they can get after him. So I'm going Vegas on that one. Baltimore, Cincinnati, a little AFC North matchup. This one's tough because what Cincinnati team are you going to get to show up? You're playing on the road at Cincinnati. Once again, Baltimore is coming in as a team who's learning a new offense, right? Some of the touches to Zay Flowers, although they looked good, felt a little bit forced at times. Lamar wasn't as sharp as he usually is. I mean, he hasn't played in 10 months. What do you expect? But, it is kind of that week one for a lot of these guys too is that kind of preseason game, because for Baltimore they didn't play barely any of their starters for a preseason because of the injury issues that still continue to pile up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm going Baltimore on this one just because I think Cincinnati always starts slow. I think Baltimore always beats them early in the season and then loses to them later on in the season. I think their offense will look good. I think it'll be interesting to see Cincinnati's defense without their two safeties, right? Because Jesse Bates on Atlanta and just not having the guys you usually have who kind of anchored down that defense. It'll be interesting to see if their defense is just as good.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with Baltimore in the past has been, when their starting running back has gone out, they've kind of faltered a little bit. They haven't had the depth to pick up the pace, but they've been able to do that. They were able to do that last week. And Von Bell, Jesse Bates not being there in Cincinnati, and just the way they played, I mean, it clearly looks like they're just not even paying attention to T. Higgins. They don't want to. They didn't throw to him at all. I think that Baltimore does pull a win out in this one. And like I said, I mean, I'm looking just down at all of this, and literally every game that I'm looking at is 50-50. Yeah. Every single game that I'm looking at, either team could win in this week.
Should be a good week. Should be a good week, definitely. Seattle at Detroit. Detroit coming off of that huge upset last week that I predicted. Against Kansas City. And Seattle, I mean, I don't know what to expect from Seattle. I'm still trying to figure them out.
Yeah.
I don't know how Geno Smith lays off of being a starting quarterback for 5 years and then comes out and plays how he does. I don't get it.
Because he was ready, waiting in the wings. I mean, the loss to the Rams was rough because it's, that is not a good Rams offense. They've obviously had they have a lot of depth in that team. Obviously, with the guys, they had to pick up the pace of Cam Akers and Cooper Kupp. Yeah. You see a new kind of clear number one guy, and you see, I don't remember his name, the Samoan receiver that took over for Cooper Kupp. But their defense is stout still. Even losing Jalen Ramsey did not matter, it seems, for them. Aaron Donald, as long as Aaron Donald's on that team, it seems like they're going to pull it out. However, Detroit they're here. They are what Seattle was, 5-6 years ago when they were, in that mediocrity. Now they're coming back. I mean, Detroit is ready. They are able. They want to win. It's going to be at home too. Yeah. It's their home opener. I think that they care too much to lose that ball game. Okay. And I think that they continue to show that they are not a team to be doubted. They have wanted it for so long, and they've worked at it for so long. And, I've always had my concerns about Jared Goff, but I don't think Seattle has the defense to shake it up enough. I think it'll be a shootout. Okay. It'll either be a shootout or it'll be a 10-7 game. Yeah. But I picked the Lions in this one.
Okay. I think Detroit is fool's gold.
Really?
I think they came out, and I think having the victory over Kansas City, I think that's huge for them. I think it gives them confidence going into this game. But there's something I just can't trust about Detroit. I don't know what it is. I like Dan Campbell a lot. I think we'll bite your toes off, all that. I like that. I like his. He's just gritty. He's just a gritty coach. You want to work hard for him.
Oh yeah.
Which makes me feel like I want to believe in Detroit. But there's just something about Detroit, at least in this game, let's just say, against Seattle, who I think is even better coach than Detroit. I'm going Seattle.
Well, yeah, it's Pete Carroll. I mean, it's hard to pass it up. I just think Seattle can only do so well for so long, and Seattle always the difference is, like, especially in Dan Campbell's tenure, the Lions have started out very hot and then have fell throughout the rest of the year. Whereas then, the Seahawks have always taken a long time to get going, and then they turn it on in the second half and almost inevitably always find the playoffs. Yeah. So I think that's just going to be the syndrome more of just where there's. If this game was week 15, yeah, I'd give it to Seattle probably. Okay. Being that it's here this week too, with how these two teams have played, the script is right for the scales to tip, and Seattle to go, okay, we're not a bad team. Detroit to go, okay, we're not the best team ever. Yeah. I still think they pull it out though.
Okay. Then we got the Chargers at Tennessee. I think the Chargers win this game. I think the Chargers are going to be an offensive onslaught all year long, just because they can't afford to not be. They have one of the best talented casts around Justin Herbert that there can be. And Austin Eckler is a top back in this league. So they can do a little bit of everything. I'm going with the Chargers on this one, and a lot of that's because I don't know what Tennessee is.
They don't know what they are. I'll tell you what, though, they do, if anything, they do defend the run well. If you're a fantasy manager, Austin Eckler is not your guy this week, I don't think. If you have him, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, those are the guys to play because the Tennessee cornerbacks are non-existent. They're not there. They just don't do anything well. Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to be a big week for the Chargers defense to show their prowess. Yeah. You get Ryan. You get the blitz going. You get Bosa and Mack on Tannehill. He will turn the ball over, especially when you have the guys that they have in that secondary. So I think that the Chargers do. I think it'll be closer than people think. Yeah. I really think it will because also, I think Derrick Henry will have another big game for himself. Mm-hmm. But I do think the Chargers pull out a win in this one.
I think the thing about Tennessee is it's weird because this is one of those games that they would win.
It is.
Like it's one of those games where they feel a little bit outmatched, but for some reason they'll pull out a win.
The Tennessee Titans play to the talent they play, the opponents they play, more than any team I've ever seen. They will play like lights out, a shootout against the Chiefs one week, and then they'll play, a 10-7 game against the Texans the next. And it makes no sense, but they do it time and time again.
Yep. Next one up is Chicago at Tampa Bay. It all depends on what Chicago team shows up, right? Because, I'm hard-pressed to believe that that's who Chicago is, but then there's part of me that wants to believe that's who Chicago is.
I'm hard-pressed to believe that's who Tampa Bay is. I don't think anyone expected that game to go out the way it did, and I think that, there's no, at least for the Panthers fandom, there's no outcome in this game that looks good for the Panthers if you don't if you don't beat New Orleans, because if not, then Tampa Bay is 2-0 and you have not won a game, or you're 0-2 and now the Bears have won a game against a division rival with a quarterback against a quarterback you gave up, or that quarterback you gave up and let go is now balling out. So there's no instance where that goes well for the Panthers fans. So I'll give it a washout. They could tie for all. My hope is a tie. And my prediction is a tie.
I'm gonna go with Tampa. I think Tampa is gonna be far more dangerous than they will ever look with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. I just do. I think Baker Mayfield with the right weapons around him, with the right coaching staff, is good enough for Tampa.
He continues to show it against all doubt and all naysayers. Yep. Then you got Jacksonville hosting Kansas City. Yep. It's the same thing. If Travis Kelce's not playing in that game, I'm not picking him to win. Yeah. There's no one else. Mahomes is getting the Cam Newton treatment now. he has no weapons. Yeah. He has no defense. Mm-hmm. And the Jaguars, while they did look rough against Indianapolis, I did not expect that game to be as close as it was. Yeah. I think if there's no Travis Kelce, Jaguars get that win.
I agree. And I agree because there's nobody to step up to the plate in that spot for Travis Kelce as a number one guy, right? So I'm gonna go Jacksonville too, and Jacksonville's, they're ridiculously talented too with adding Calvin Ridley and all that.
It's only look better.
We'll see, but we got the two young quarterbacks going at it. We know the NFL; they knew what they were doing. With the Colts at Houston this early in the season, this is gonna be fun. And this one, you talk about toss-ups for the week.
To me, I think Indianapolis blows them out.
You think so?
The way they hung on with Jacksonville was unlike anything I thought I was ever going to see. No Jonathan Taylor. You have Michael Pittman looking like a bat out of hell. And I think that, Anthony Richardson played well. Yeah. He didn't play lights out, but he showed flashes of success to the point where I didn't see anything like that I saw nothing from Houston. Yeah. And they got refresh my memory, they got blown out by
Baltimore.
Right, by Baltimore, right? Yeah. So I think that I mean
25-9, I think it was.
Yeah, I think personally I think Indianapolis just dominates them.
Yeah. You've taken me to the dark side here. I'm gonna go Indy too. Just because I don't know, that's tough. Man.
I mean, I agree with your perspective. Before the season starts, that's a toss up, but I just think the way Jacksonville's a much better team than the Ravens are right now, and for them to put a shootout up against Jacksonville with that defense and without Jonathan Taylor was, to me, completely unexpected. I mean, I can't, other than Michael Pittman, I can't name you another player on that Colts offense. Yeah. And so that's where I'm like, all right, if they can do that against Jacksonville, and Jacksonville's always been a kind of up and down team, but I saw nothing from Houston that would give me any sort of confidence.
That's tough. I'm just devil's advocate here. I'm gonna go Houston. Right?
Well, I get, and again, for Panthers fans, there's no outcome in this game that does well if Bryce Young loses again. Right. There's no outcome. Either C.J. Stroud looks good or Anthony Richardson looks like the guy we should have stayed and taken.
Well, they both look good, So either way,
there's no outcome that's good for the Panthers here.
I think Houston's defense is prepped to be really good, but I think Indy's is too. I think that whole division has good defenses in it. Playing against young quarterbacks all over it. Yeah. So I'm gonna go Houston. It's tough. Just because that's a toss up of all toss ups. I think right there, because two rookie QBs, you got really good defenses on both sides. Who plays worse is the real question. But San Francisco at Los Angeles, so the 49ers at the Rams.
See, that's, I think, your toss-up of all toss-up. Like I said, every single game in this week, I mean, we've said it, the NFL is hard to predict every single year, but especially this week, so many divisional matchups this early on, like a lot more than I can remember in recent years. And for this one, again, same thing. I mean, look at San Francisco played lights out against Pittsburgh, and I don't think Pittsburgh necessarily has a star-studded defense. I mean, they've got Highsmith, they've got T.J. Watt, they've got good guys. No, don't get me wrong. But I think the 49ers are the 49ers. I think Brock Purdy looks like a solid player, and his connection with Brandon Ayuk already has been dominant. Christian McCaffrey obviously looked like everything he's supposed to be. Yeah. But it is the Rams defense, and the Rams defense is dominant. I think if Aaron Donald it's going to be between Aaron Donald and that offensive line. Yeah. If he gets to Brock Purdy, gets Brock Purdy on his toes. You saw how he made Geno Smith look, and Geno Smith's a seasoned veteran, even if he doesn't have a lot of starting experience. Yeah. He's been in the league forever. So I'll put this one as a toss-up, but for me, I think San Francisco gets the win.
Okay. I think San Francisco wins too. I just think there's something about LA that's just giving like the return of the Mac vibes. Like they coming back this year, I think. But I just don't think they're healthy enough right now to get themselves going. So I think that's why one that
the 49ers have a much better defense in that regard, and your second string's not going to do well against that defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Giants, I think they get right against Arizona.
I don't know, because you saw what they did against Washington. Their defense, especially. You had a touchdown. You had 2 picks, 1 for a touchdown, multiple sacks, and a forced fumble against Washington. That's exactly what Cowboys did against New York. So for me, again, if you're a fantasy football player and you need a defense, I would pick up Arizona. I mean, they put up 25 points against Washington, and I think they could do that easily against the Giants. I mean, I don't think they're going to do anything offensively, so that's another toss-up. Really, it's it's the battle of mediocrity. Yeah. But this one could be a toss-up or a tie.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. And then the Jets at Dallas. I think that if they had Aaron Rodgers, I think it'd be a different story. But I think Dallas's defense looked really good.
Oh, yeah.
Zach Wilson still looks like Zach Wilson to me, so I'm going Dallas.
Yeah, I think this is going to be Zach Wilson's coming back to earth game. I think this is where they're going to go after this game. They're going to go, okay, do we need to call Tom Brady? Do we need to call, Matt Ryan?
Phillip Rivers?
Do we need to call Cam Newton?
Yeah.
Look at I will always pitch it every time there's an opening. I will pitch it. Cam Newton looks good in any NFL uniform, and he still can ball.
Yeah, and the last time you saw him, he joined the team mid-season. So why do you expect? Anyway, no, never mind.
I know, but so this one I think Dallas, especially in Dallas, I don't think there's any way that the Jets put up. I think it's going to be multiple interception game for Wilson. Okay, I think it's going to be brutal.
Yeah. Okay, and then Washington at Denver. There's something about Denver that makes me feel like they're going to be better than they were last year. I mean, you can't get any worse than what they were. So, but I think Denver against Washington, I think, is an interesting matchup. I'm gonna go Denver. I'm gonna stick with Denver. I think they're gonna be back this year. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I can't figure it out. But I think, I mean, of course, no Jerry Jeudy. That doesn't help you out if you're Denver in week 1. But I think Washington's gonna be good too. But I think on this week, in the altitude and stuff like that, I think Denver gets his win.
I think that Washington has proven its ability to win in games that it shouldn't win in. I think, and of course, I'm going to pull for the hometown kid in Sam Howell. I'm going to pull for him to go over Russell Wilson. Yeah. The true North Carolina quarterback, whatever Russell Wilson wants to say for NC State. He still claims Wisconsin. So I'm going to go with Washington in this one. I think they just show that they can win these kind of weird games, and I think they'll pull out a win here.
Alrighty, so Sunday Night Football, Miami at New England. Miami big. Miami's just they're too darn talented. If they can stay healthy, they'll be dangerous. In an AFC that I think, let's be honest, I think we forgot about Miami a little bit in the AFC because there were so many other teams that we were like we forgot about them because they weren't healthy last year, and now they are, and I'm like, that's that. I mean, that looks like something I don't want to face not even once a year.
Yeah, I mean, their defense, getting Ramsey only made their defense that much better. Getting Raheem Mostert only made their running attack that much better. I mean, New England, to their credit, they were down 16-0 and came back to be within, they had a fighting chance there at the end of that game against the defending NFC champs. Being that it is in Foxborough, that plays a much bigger role. I think it's going to come up to, this is about, this is new age versus old age. This is Belichick versus, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Mike Macdonald.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a big factor, who controls the turnover battle, who makes the least amount of mistakes. If Ramsey gets after Mac Jones, I mean, that's going to be brutal, but he played a good ball game. So I think that could be I think I'll give Miami that one, but I think it's a very close game.
Okay. Monday Night Football doubleheader. I hate that they did the games like this.
What?
They should have, honestly, because they got New Orleans at Carolina at 7:15, then they got Cleveland at Pittsburgh at 8:15, which is silly because why didn't they do the thing they used to do in week 1? You remember they used to do like the doubleheader in week 1 where one team would play at like
7 and then one at like 10.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were both playing that. I didn't even know that was happening.
Yeah, I find it a little silly. But anywho, New Orleans at Carolina, 7:15 on Monday night. I think we already did this one, so we'll skip that one.
Piece.
Yeah, we've already said that one. But Cleveland at Pittsburgh, the other Monday night, doubleheader on that one.
I mean, they looked rough against San Francisco, and I don't know. I'm gonna say it was a fluke for Cleveland. I do not think they are that good of a football team. I mean, of course, everyone in the country is rooting for them, not other than Cleveland's rooting for them to not be a good football team. I think Pittsburgh reevaluates themselves, shows that they're a good football team, or at least a Mike Tomlin football team. You don't see Mike Tomlin win twice or lose twice like that. So I think that they get the win in this one. I think it'll be a lot lower scoring of a game. Yeah. But I'd say I'd pick Pittsburgh to get the win here.
I think I had predicted early on in the preseason and whatnot that Pittsburgh would finish last in the division, and I predicted this will be the first time that they have a losing season. Just because, the AFC stack, that's just how it is. You can't win but so many games when everybody else is,
Yeah.
So, but I think Cleveland will be back because you get a real off season for Deshaun Watson, and, has he really had a bad season?
No.
I haven't seen it. Last year you can say what you want, but he was out for a year and a half, so whatever. But I think my thought process on this is I just think Cleveland's going to be the better team in the end. I think they played well last week against Cincinnati, against who's supposed to be the top of the division, and I think a team that looks like they're closer to the bottom than anything in Pittsburgh. And we talked about that defense and what they could or couldn't be. I think Cleveland is gonna be good, and Myles Garrett always eats against Pittsburgh.
He does.
Or everybody for that matter.
That he does.
So who did you get a chance to pick this game?
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh re-shows their dominance. Okay. I think that they do pull out at least a win here. I mean, like I said, it's not very often you see Mike Tomlin lose that many games in a row, and especially divisionally. I do think they do. I will have a losing season. I do think they will end at the bottom of division, depending upon how the Ravens do. But I don't see them losing this game just because of what it means to that area and what it would mean for that team. It's very interesting, like I said, with so many of these matches where you have 2 divisional games already under your belt before the season even is, halfway through or, a month in. It creates a much different mindset for these coaches, and it creates a lot more different storylines to where you're starting to see the playoff picture even come to pass, this early on. So,
Exactly.
But like I said, every year it's gotten crazier and crazier, and I think that it's going to be harder and harder to start picking these games. But it'll be a good week of football, that's for sure.
Most definitely. But we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Jack, I definitely appreciate you for coming by.
Of course.
You'll be back on again definitely
course.
soon. We'll see where the Panthers are at that point in the season.
Yeah.
You never know, considering right now where we are this early into the season. But definitely a lot of fun. Definitely keep us updated. You can always – what's your X, I guess, is what we're calling it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Just so that people can stay, up to date on anything Panthers, anything high school sports around the area as well.
Yeah, so it's Jack Taylor TV for all of that. We've got a pretty cool week coming up. We've got our game of the week, of course, and that is Porter Ridge against Monroe High School. That's streaming live on BahakelSports.com on Friday night. Now, it's weird this week because of Rosh Hashanah. Schools are not out playing, kids are not going to school on Friday, but so some schools are playing Thursday, some are playing Friday. So we've got a lot more games this week. So make sure to tune into the Blitz at 11 on Friday night as well. We'll have a lot more games that we're able to normally because we got 2 days to get them.
Yep.
So got some big matchups, some big names coming out around, and we'll have all of that there. So be sure, of course, to tune in. That's, again, Jack Taylor TV, and then, of course, just Bahakel Sports on everything.
Yep, of course, and that's how you can stay in touch with the Keep Prowling podcast as well. We definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. Once again, the Keep Prowling podcast is on all major podcasting platforms, so be sure to tune in. Put the Keep Prowling podcast in the queue with all your favorite other podcasts. But we'll see you guys on the next one, Jack. Once again, appreciate you for coming by. We'll see you guys on the next episode of the Keep Prowling podcast. Until next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and if you liked it, be sure to give me a thumbs up.